NASA engineers figured out that the larger piece came from the Challenger's left inboard wing flap, which helped to steer the orbiter during entry and landing, and that the second piece had probably broken off the bigger one. This was a pretty surprising discovery because no one expected any parts of the shuttle to make it more than a dozen miles from the sea to shore. The Challenger disaster is the main reason that all plans to allow civilians into space were stopped for 2 decades, which frankly was probably for the best, because I don't think I would be signing up to get on a shuttle after watching 7 people die in such a horrific way. One final little-known fact is that crew member Ellison Onizuka brought his daughter's soccer ball with him on the mission. And even though he didn't survive, the ball was amazingly recovered from the Challenger wreckage intact. It was put into a memorial for Onizuka until 3 decades later when the ball was taken by another astronaut up to the International Space Station, which I thought was a fitting way to bring the tragedy full circle.
Our second picture today is one that you could find on any social media account, which makes the story behind it all the more chilling. The Ruby family from Duncan, Oklahoma, was a newspaper family. John and his wife, Joy Tinker, worked together at the Marlowe Review, where John was the publisher. They had a son and daughter together, Catherine and Alan. Catherine was 17 in 2014, and 19-year-old Alan attended the University of Oklahoma. The family was unassuming and normal, probably just like my family and yours. Not the type that you would ever think something tragic could happen to, but then it did. On October 13, 2014, the Rubys' longtime housekeeper, Rosemary Chavez, showed up at their house around 8:30 a.m. and found the home eerily quiet. What she didn't know was that John's co-workers were already a bit worried about him because, uncharacteristically, he hadn't shown up to work on Friday, and he missed the weekly high school football game, which he always went to. These were hints that something sinister had happened.
But no one really suspected anything. Carefully going through the housekeeper noticed that all of the cabinets were open and that the dog's food bowls were overfilled. Going into the kitchen, she saw a pair of feet, Catherine's feet, and then John lying face down in the doorway. She also found Tinker lying cold and unresponsive further in the kitchen. All 3 had been shot to death. Completely distraught at finding the family she knew so well murdered in their own home, she made a harrowing call to 911. The police were quick to arrive on the scene and tape off the house, while the Rubys' neighbors flooded into the street to see what was going on. Many of them were especially upset to learn that it had been the Rubys who were killed, as they were known in the community to be great neighbors and a kind family. As news spread about the horrific death of the 3 Rubys, so did the rumor that maybe they'd been killed in a robbery that went very, very wrong. The police believed that the crime scene had possibly been staged to look like a robbery, but the idea still terrified the entire community, who worried about who would be next.
This theory would turn out to be completely wrong, but no one knew that yet, and they also didn't know some of the seriously surprising twists and turns this case would take. And one of the weirdest coincidences that I've heard, especially since it really was just a coincidence, Alan Ruby was arrested only a few hours after his family were found dead. But the charge had absolutely nothing to do with his family. All the way back in January, Alan had pled guilty to credit card theft after he had stolen his own grandmother's credit card from her. He had been put into a delayed sentencing program and placed on probation. As part of this, he was fined $1,500, had to pay $5,980 in restitution, and even complete a cognitive behavior program, which was meant to fix his behavior. But as we keep going, I think you'll agree with me that it didn't work. The case is a little more complicated than him just taking his grandmother's credit card and using it, though.
Alan actually opened a credit card in his grandmother's name, which is more than stealing, it's fraud. He was also charged with possessing stolen checks and a related crime.
At this point, the local police were investigating him for forging checks worth about $17,500 since August. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison for the fraud charge, but this was just the beginning. Back on October 9th, only 4 days before his death, John had realized that his 9mm semi-automatic handgun was missing when he was headed to work. He kept it in the console of his truck, and he immediately told the police. He also told them that he thought it had been taken that morning. He didn't know it, of course, but it had actually been his son Alan who stole the gun from his truck, and Alan knew exactly what he was going to do with the gun. The same day that John noticed his gun was gone, Alan showed up at the house. It was around 8 p.m. when he confronted his mother where she was in the kitchen. He shot her right in the neck, but miraculously the bullet didn't kill her, though she fell to the ground.
Seeing that his mother was still alive, Alan raised the gun again and shot her a second time, this time aiming at her head so that the bullet would kill her. Catherine was outside washing her car at the time, but she came rushing into the house through the front door and then into the kitchen. Had she heard gunshots? Did she see her mother lying on the ground? I don't know for sure, and we won't know because Alan shot her in the head, immediately killing her. I found this next detail really disturbing to imagine, because after killing his mother and sister, Alan waited in the house with their bodies for his dad to come home. I think what I found so chilling about this was that sometimes it's easier to imagine crimes happening in the heat of the moment, when someone reacts more than they think. But not only did Alan plan his family's deaths when he stole the gun, he then patiently waited for about an hour for his father to come home so he could complete the job. When John finally came home, Alan struck, shooting him almost the exact same way he had killed his mother, first by shooting him in the neck and then the head when he hit the ground.
After everyone was dead, Alan still didn't flee the scene right away. He took the time to take the DVD disc from the house's security system and then left. He carefully disposed of the DVD and the gun by throwing them both into a lake. When he drove back to his dorm room from the lake, he grabbed his cell phone, which he had left on purpose so that it would be evidence that he was in the dorm at the time of his family's deaths, and so that it wouldn't ping off any cell phone towers near the Ruby home. To add to this, he also made a post on social media saying that he was at his dorm on that night. Alan had clearly planned his crime. He thought of almost everything. As if nothing had happened at all, Alan then left the state of Oklahoma, not to run away and flee the crime as you might be assuming. No, instead, he went to a University of Oklahoma versus Texas game in Dallas. There he stayed in the fancy Ritz-Carlton Hotel and partied the whole weekend. He took this picture of his friends at the hotel and posted it.
You can see the girl smiling, clearly with no idea about what Alan had just done to his whole family. Alan didn't even go to the game, instead spending his time at the bars. His friends who were with him later said that over the weekend he was happy and laughing and having a good time and never did anything to make them suspect anything. To me, this not only shows that Alan wasn't really battling with his conscience after killing his family, but also that he was extremely confident he wouldn't get caught. So how was he caught? Well, when police were first examining the Ruby family deaths, they asked Alan to come to the house to help with the investigation. At first, he seemed really distressed when he was told that his family had been killed, but when he was at the house, the police thought he was acting really strange and said that he was cold and callous. Despite having just lost his parents and sister, he apparently didn't ask investigators many questions about what had happened and was very nonchalant about the whole thing. Police suspicions were raised and they brought him in to be interviewed after he had just been arrested on the fraud charge. While there, Alan soon confessed to stealing his father's gun and killing his family only 1 day after their bodies were found. Unsurprisingly, Alan was then charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. He told the investigators the exact story that I told you. He shot his mother,
sister, and father before throwing the gun and DVD from the surveillance system into a lake to get rid of the evidence. But only part of that story was true. You see, Alan had clearly planned this crime and thought it through quite a bit, so when he told the police that he got rid of the gun and DVD, it was a lie. That's not what he did at all. Why did he lie? Maybe he thought to himself, if I lie, then I keep the evidence that would actually tie me to the crime hidden. Maybe he thought, if they can't find the evidence, then I get a lesser sentence. Or maybe he thought they wouldn't be able to prove it at all. Either way, it didn't work. Alan must not have expected the police to find the storage unit he had, but they did. There was surveillance of him driving to the storage buildings just after his family had been shot. Inside his unit, the police found the storage buildings just after his family had been shot. Inside his unit, the police found the missing 9mm gun believed to be the one used in the shooting, and the surveillance tape from the Ruby's home, as well as blue nitro gloves that they believe he wore when committing the crime. They also found a bunch of other things that Alan had taken from his family's house, including his mother's purse, her checks, deposit slips and credit cards, 2 of the computers, an iPad mini, and a box filled with prescription medication. On his way to Dallas, Alan had tried to discard the clothing that he wore when shooting his family by throwing the evidence on the side of the road. But why did he do it? It's the question I always find myself asking, especially with a 19-year-old killer. Why would he kill his own family in such a cold-blooded way? Well, apparently Alan would go on huge spending frenzies and often enjoyed showing off to the people he met in university that he was quite wealthy. He especially enjoyed the fact that other people were drawn to him because of his Rolex watch and the Louis Vuitton shoes he wore. Alan would even go so far as to tag his own social media posts expensive. When his parents paid for him to take a trip to Paris, he ended up spending more than $5,000. His parents had actually gone to the police over this because they thought Alan was using a credit card that didn't belong to him. And this was the beginning of the stolen credit card charge, because it was his grandmother's that he was using. Later, it was believed that he had also stolen one of his mother's credit cards, or if he hadn't, he started one in her name without her permission. But all the money he recklessly spent wasn't his, it was his family's. They already had an incident 2 years earlier when Alan and his mother got into such a bad argument over money that he apparently assaulted her. At the end of their rope and not knowing what else to do, his parents decided that he needed to be completely financially cut off because he was just too reckless. It's pretty clear that someone who enjoyed flaunting money so much that they would tweet making fun of people who ate ramen noodles would be upset about losing their ability to frivolously spend money. But it wasn't just his anger about being cut off that led Alan to shoot his family. Apparently, Alan told the police that he owed about $3,000 to a loan shark, and he thought that if his family all died, he would inherit all of their money. Not only would this solve his problems with paying back a loan shark, but he would also have all the money that he wanted to spend and no one to tell him he couldn't. His father had 2 life insurance policies worth a total of $20,000 that would have gone to his wife if he died, and then been split between the 2 siblings if their parents died. Was this the sum that Alan had killed for? When he was at court for the triple homicide, Alan looked like a timid, scared teen. When he spoke, his voice was often so quiet that it was hard to hear him, and he visibly shook, neither of which really fit the image I had in my head of someone who would be outraged enough about money to kill their parents and sister. Alan often cried in front of investigators and the judge, but the prosecutor said that the show of emotion was crocodile tears, and the only thing he was remorseful about was the fact that his life is basically over. This was pretty much confirmed when he never actually apologized for killing his parents and sister in court. He did, however, admit to being a shopaholic, which I thought was a big understatement. Part of the testimony given was by the housekeeper, Chavez, who found the Ruby's bodies. She gave a tearful description of the horrific discovery, but also added in something really interesting. Chavez said that a month before she was killed, Alan's teenage sister, Catherine, was crying about him being up to his old tricks again, probably referring to his spending. She was crying so much that Chavez tried to comfort her. The Catherine said that she'd been told about some of the things Alan was saying to his friends, including that he was going to end up killing them, something that is pretty hard to comfort someone about. During his trial, the insurance company actually petitioned the judge to rule that Alan wasn't entitled to receive the policy funds, which makes perfect sense. It currently hasn't been publicly declared